Starting off this countdown, we have room 333. The Langham Hotel is said to be one of the most haunted hotels in London, as it is haunted by more than 5 ghosts. The most active ghost is said to be that of a German prince. It's believed that he threw himself out of a window on an upper story room and passed away. Guests have seen his ghost on a number of occasions. He is known to move through walls and close doors. If you feel a sudden drop in temperature, it's said that's a sign that he is near. You also have the ghost of a man with a gaping wound on his face. But the most haunted area in the whole hotel is room 333. People who have stayed in this room have encountered a number of terrifying ghosts. The first sighting was made by a BBC newscaster. He was staying in the room when he woke up to see a fluorescent ball of light floating above him, which slowly transformed into a human figure. The apparition hovered in his room, and he was dressed in Victorian evening wear, but one of his legs was missing. He came towards the newscaster with his arms open and eyes wide, before disappearing into thin air. Another ghost that haunts this room is the ghost of a doctor who took the life of his wife on their honeymoon. This guy often appears wearing a cloak and often has blank staring eyes. And lastly, we have Emperor Napoleon III. Apparently he lived at the Langham during his last days in exile. And he's also made an appearance in room 333. In our 9th spot, we have the Hay Adams. Located in Washington, D.C., this hotel is said to be the most famous hotel in the capital. That's because a number of big hotshots have stayed there, like Obama. But the hotel has a pretty haunting past. In 1884, John Hay, who was President Abraham Lincoln's private secretary, and Henry Adams built their homes on the plot of land where the hotel was built upon. In 1885, Adams' wife, Marion Hooper Adams, ended up taking her life there. She had been battling a case of serious depression, triggered by the death of her father 10 months earlier. In 1927, after Adams passed away, the houses were destroyed and replaced with the hotel. But it didn't matter, because Marion's soul is attached to the land that she died on, so she now haunts the hotel. Guests and staff members have frequently reported hearing the sounds of someone crying. They believe that it is Marion weeping over her heartbreak and loss of father. In our 8th spot, we have the Ballygolly Castle, and I just absolutely love the name of this place, so I had to put it on today's list. Like Ballygolly, Ballygally, I don't care, it's funny. Anyways, this was a castle built in 1625 Ireland. Now it has been transformed into a hotel. Turns out that years ago, the original owners, Lord James Shaw and his wife, Lady Isabella, lived in the castle. That was until Isabella's death. She either fell, jumped, or was pushed to her death from the top of the castle. To this day, her ghost still haunts her old home. She has been seen wandering around the castle, knocking on doors, and on multiple occasions can be heard weeping from her tower. Moving on to number 7, we have room 873. Located in the luxury mountain resort Banff Springs Hotel, room 873 is so haunted that they had to permanently seal it up, hoping that it would seal away the evil with it. According to a number of legends, decades ago a family was killed in room 873. In 1928, a married couple and their daughter checked into the hotel, but they never checked out. During one night, the father ended up taking the lives of his wife and daughter before taking his own life. No one knows why he did this. Soon after, the room was refurbished and booked out to visitors. But weird things started happening in that room. Guests would wake up in the middle of the night to sounds of screaming in their room. When they would flip on the lights, they would see bloody handprints on the mirror inside the room. Obviously, they would freak the hell out and run to the front desk, but when the staff went to the room to investigate the prints, they would be gone. It was happening so frequently that they decided to board up the room. In fact, if you go to the hotel today, there are rooms ending in 7-3 on each floor, except on the 8th floor. In the spot where it should be, you can tell that a room has been boarded up. In our 6th spot today, we have Lizzie Borden House. Turns out that the infamous Lizzie Borden House, where she allegedly killed her parents, is now a fun little bed and breakfast. But a haunted fun little bed and breakfast. So story goes that back in 1892, both of Lizzie's parents were found dead. After investigating the scene, Lizzie was the only person who seemed guilty, so she was blamed for their murder. While staying there, guests have reported seeing doors open and close on their own. Also, late at night, apparently Lizzie can be heard laughing at the top of the stairs. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Omni Grove Park Inn. Back in the 1920s, while staying at the Omni Grove Park Inn in North Carolina, a young woman was either pushed or jumped to her death from her hotel room 545. To this day, her presence still wanders the walls of the hotel. Some guests have felt her presence, others have seen a strange pink mist form around them, and some have actually seen this ghostly woman herself. She appears in a flowy pink gown, hence why people just call her the Pink Lady. The people most sensitive to seeing her are young children. A number of children have seen her and been like, "Mommy, who's that lady in the pink dress?" Meanwhile, no one's there. How freaky. Coming in at number 4, we have the Ostasaga Resort. Located in New York, this resort has quite the fair share of history. When it was first erected, it was actually a school for girls, and to this day, these little girlies still haunt the area. Apparently, while on the 3rd floor hallway, you'll be able to hear a bunch of them giggling and whispering. In fact, Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters went to investigate this place a couple years ago, and when doing so, they captured the presence of a bunch of shadowy figures, ghostly whisperings, and other paranormal activity. If you want to check out the place today, go to the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th floors. That's where all the spooky stuff is said to happen. In our 3rd spot today, we have La Posada de Santa Fe. This resort and spa hotel is anything but relaxing. Turns out that it is haunted by a German woman named Julia Stab. Oh my god, her last name is Stab. It's probably like Stob. It definitely is because it's German, but anyway, it makes it spookier. Before it was a resort, it was her mansion. It was built by her husband in 1882. A couple years later, Julia fell into a really bad depression. Her 8th child ended up passing away shortly after birth, and so Julia locked herself in her room. She didn't leave her room until 1896. When she passed away, her soul latched onto the house. To this day, she still wanders around the halls. Most frequently, she will appear in Suite 100. It's now a guest suite, but it used to be her bedroom. In fact, Julia loved to take baths, so people staying in the suite often hear the water running in the middle of the night. Moving on to number 2, we have the Fairmount Royal York Hotel. Turns out that there's a haunted hotel in my hometown and I didn't even know it. Toronto's Royal York Hotel is nearly 100 years old. Construction of it finished in 1929, and over the years a number of members of royalty, celebrities, and millionaires and ghosts have stayed at this hotel. Seems to be a nice luxury hotel, minus the fact that it's completely haunted. One famous ghost is the man dressed in a purple coat that wanders around the 8th floor. There's also ghosts of children haunting the halls. One guest told the concierge that they heard children running up and down the halls on the first night that they checked in, but they saw no children. When they looked through the peephole the next night, they saw a gray-haired man with a purple waistcoat. They initially thought that it was a hotel staff member, but when they opened the door, the man disappeared into thin air. The hotel also has a crystal ballroom that is also haunted. Guests frequently hear noises and music within the ballroom, even after it's been closed. And in our number 1 spot today, we have room B340. Queen Mary Hotel is said to be one of the most haunted hotels in America. There are a number of ghosts that haunt this hotel, from Jackie, the little girl who haunts the first-class pool, to a man named John Petter who was crushed by a watertight door, to 2nd Senior Officer William Eric Stark, who accidentally drank cleaning fluid instead of gin, and one of the cooks who was baked alive by his own staff during World War II. So yeah, a lot of dark things have happened on this ship turned hotel. Now, there is one room that you never ever want to visit, and that's room B340. It's the site of a huge tragedy. So back in the 60s, the ship was used for transatlantic cruises. Well, while on this cruise, a man went crazy and took the lives of 2 women in this room. When his crimes were discovered, he was locked in the room until they could dock the ship and deal with him. The door was locked from the outside, and a guard was positioned outside the room so the killer couldn't escape. At one point, the guard heard the man pounding on the door saying that someone was in the room with him and was trying to kill him. Obviously, the guard was like, "I ain't no idiot, I'm not falling for that," so he never opened the door. He thought this guy was just trying to get him to open the door so he could escape. Here's where it gets weird. Shortly after, the guard heard nothing coming from the room, so he thought the man finally settled down and went to bed. The next day, the ship arrived in New York and the NYPD boarded the ship to arrest this man. But when he opened the door, they found the man's body parts scattered across the room. His limbs had been ripped off and were all over the place. There's no way that he could have done this to himself. So what happened in there? Was there actually someone in that room with him? If so, how did they get in and then out? A number of guests who have stayed in that room have reported eerie things happening to them in the middle of the night, like flickering lights, knocking, apparitions, and the water turning on and off by itself.
Starting off at number 10 is the Stone Line Inn in Oklahoma. This inn was originally built as a Victorian mansion in 1907 for F.E. Houghton, but it was also used as a funeral home for an 8-year period when the Houghton family struggled financially. The embalming table from that time is still on display at what is now a bed and breakfast. Possibly as a result of the death that was within it previously, guests have reported strange noises throughout the house. Guests also say they have seen the daughter Augusta, who died in the house from whooping cough, and F.E. Houghton himself smoking a pipe. But we got more ghosts coming for you at number 9, Hotel Europe in Vancouver. Now this building was completed in 1909 to be the prominent hotel in town, and it was, up until Hotel Vancouver opened up in 1916. After it lost the majority of the favorable clientele, the hotel fell into disrepute and into a brothel. It eventually became a heritage building with a storefront on the main level though. So over this time, the areaways underground were filled up. These were paths underground that connected to the sidewalk so that freight could be loaded into the cellars in the basement. During the construction, one of the times the Hotel Europe changed, a contractor had a frightening experience. Apparently, he was working by himself on some repairs in the cellar, close up to a bricked up areaway door. The contractor left the cellar briefly just to fetch something, and when he returned, his tools were just scattered all around the floor. He then heard scratching noises coming from behind the brick wall and felt a bad presence. Scared and confused, he quickly gathered up his tools and left the cellar as fast as he could. After that, he flat out refused to work there again. Sometimes scratching noises can be heard coming from the other side of the bricked up areaway, and some people dispute, yeah, it could be mice. But you have to remember, the areaways were completely filled in, bricks and concrete. Later on, after all this, the owner of a poster store on the main floor of the building saw a figure in a black coat and flat cap in her store after closing the store on security camera. When she went to check on the possible lost customer, when she swore no one was there when she closed it, he was gone. She was rightly so shaken and closed up the store quickly that night, not sure if she was seeing things. But let's move on to number 8, the Crescent Hotel, the hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. So this used to be one of the most luxurious resorts when it opened in 1886. But tough economic times hurt the Crescent Hotel and it closed in the 1930s. In 1937, Norman Baker opened its doors once again and turned it into Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital, as a man without a medical degree. It was discovered that this fraud physician was indeed running a scam. Today, the hospital has returned to its former luxurious glory, but some spirits from the past still lurk around. Some spirits included are some of Baker's old patients, including a commonly spotted Theodora. She is most often spotted fumbling her keys outside room 419. Another spirit seen around the property is a man who helped build it, Michael, an Irish stonemason who fell to his death. If you happen to stay there, they have nightly ghost tours that end at the morgue, a morgue that still remains intact from its time as a hospital, and it is said to be a hotbed of paranormal activity. At number 7, Banff Springs Hotel, Alberta. So the Fairmont Banff Springs was actually one of the first railway hotels built in the 19th century by the Canadian Pacific Railway. It was built as a part of the aim to attract travelers westward. So the hotel denies that it is haunted, but that doesn't stop the guests who stay there from sharing the encounters that they have had. The long-standing story is that in 1932 there was a bride who died while falling down one of the hotel's grand stone staircases. Guests say they have seen her still in her wedding dress dancing alone in the Cascade Ballroom. Another hotel the Canadian Pacific Railway built is our number 6, the Royal York Hotel. So this one was opened in 1929 right across from the Union Station in Toronto. At the time, and to this day, it's one of Toronto's most grand hotels, like even the Queen has stayed there. But just like the Banff Springs Hotel, it is home to its fair share of ghost stories. People talk about hearing the sounds of children running up and down the halls, but once they check to see who is making all that noise, the hallway falls silent. It's not just some tricksters running around. Also, people underneath the now closed off Crystal Ballroom report hearing voices and music coming from the vacant space. One guest even wrote on a Toronto blog that some chandeliers on the floor below it were trembling and the ceiling shook. So maybe some fancy ghosts took up residence after the ballroom was closed off permanently due to building and fire code violations. You know, our loss is some fancy ghost gain. At number 5, the Story Inn. This inn was built in 1851 in Indiana, and it truly does house quite the story. It is the only structure still left in a mining town called Story that was left inoperative after the Great Depression. It was restored and revitalized in the 1960s as a bed and breakfast, and it does have a frequent spectral guest, the Blue Lady. In the inn's guest books, there were records of a ghost called the Blue Lady who is believed to be the wife of the town's original founder, Dr. George Story. The guests of the inn record that her eyes are a hypnotic blue and she smells like cherry tobacco. To summon her, those who stay turn on the blue light beside the bed in what used to be her own room. Today, it's called the Blue Lady Room. So if she's feeling particularly nice, she will even leave behind blue items in that room if you are there to stay. At number 4, we have Mount Washington Hotel. Back in 1902, a businessman named Joseph Stickney built the hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The following year after completion, unfortunately, he passed away. It is believed that his widowed wife Carolyn now haunts the halls of the hotel, reliving the moments they had together. Hotel staff have reportedly spotted her descending the stairs for dinner and have also noticed lights inexplicably turning on and off in one of the towers. Sometimes she has been spotted standing on the balcony looking off into the distance, lost in thought. Her 4-poster maple bed is still in room 314 and has become well known as the best place to see her. Guests have reported waking up to find a woman sitting at the end of their bed, slowly brushing her hair. I wonder if she's staring at them or off in the distance, because one of them is much creepier than the other. At number 3, La Fonda on the Plaza Santa Fe. While the structure of La Fonda was built in 1922, records say it's on the site of the city's first hotel dating all the way back to the early 17th century. So the New Mexico Hotel was a favored place for travelers headed west, and is home to a couple of guests that have passed on and refused to leave. The first ghost is the former Chief Justice of the Territorial Supreme Court, John P. Slough. He was shot to death in the hotel lobby and his spirit is said to have never left. The second specter scene is a distraught salesman. The man apparently jumped into the hotel well after gambling and losing on a bad hand. He has been seen emerging from the hotel fountain. Which I have to say, if you're gambling and you lose a bad hand, 1, don't gamble, maybe, and 2, only have good hands, that's what I do. Number 2, the Prince of Wales Hotel, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, Canada. This hotel was built in 1864 and went through a few other names before becoming the Prince of Wales Hotel in 1901. It was expanded in the 70s to add additional wings on either side, but the new additions blend in, so the original architecture looks the same. Also, tourists can't really notice. So even with all the changes to the hotel, the resident ghost has not been deterred. She already spent so much time there. 200 years. So Molly Maguire was in a wooden house where the hotel is today when Americans laid siege on the town. An American soldier was tasked with searching the house and found a dark figure looking out the window. Thinking it was a British soldier, he ran the figure through with his bayonet. But it was Molly. The soldier ran off, telling no one of his mistake of killing an innocent woman. Today, the spirit of Molly is said to haunt room 207, the approximate location of Molly's bedroom. People report waking up to footsteps echoing in their dark and empty room and random lights being on when they swear they turn them off. One guest even checked out because all the haunted happenings were just too much for them. Number 1, the Red Lion Inn in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. So, all the way back in 1773, a small tavern was established on the corner that would eventually house the Red Lion Inn. In 1896, while it was known as the Stockbridge House, the entire property burned down in a fire. It was rebuilt and opened the next year, then continued to change ownership and names throughout the years. With all of that history, the inn is said to have quite a bit of spiritual activity. Guests often see figures, including a young girl carrying flowers or a man in a top hat on the premises. But room 301 is the room to go if you really want a creepy encounter. One man recorded his experience on TripAdvisor. In the middle of the night, on 3 different occasions, I woke up feeling my toes being tugged on and someone scratching my hand. I also felt as if someone or something was under the covers with me at one point. Then, at 9 a.m. in the morning, I woke up when I heard the maid knocking at the door. She opened the room with the key, walked in, and headed for the bathroom. I heard the footsteps come out of the bathroom and stop by the bed. Then it suddenly felt as though someone was fluffing up the comforter as if trying to make up the bed on the left-hand side. As hard as I tried, I could not move and I could not speak. When I looked up, I realized that I was in the room alone and no one had been there. If I was that guy, I would check out of that place immediately, but he was there for a business conference and had to deal with it.
Number 10, Diplomat Hotel, Philippines. The Dominican Hill Retreat House was built in 1913 in the famed Philippine city of Pines. With the outbreak of World War II, it became a camp for refugees escaping the Japanese army, but it was eventually invaded. It was once occupied by refugees, nuns, and soldiers, but was bombed by the American Armed Forces. People were taken taken advantage of and had their heads cut off. In the 1970s, the Wharton building was converted to the sophisticated and beautiful Diplomat Hotel, but the hotel was shut down by the 80s and left abandoned. The deserted, deteriorating building became infamous for being one of the most haunted ruins in the country. Currently, the old hotel is now under new rehabilitation by the national government as a heritage and nature park. Now, many people see headless apparitions at night and report hearing screams, cries, banging on doors, and other strange and desperate noises. Some believe the building is haunted by the restless spirits of its grim history. It's considered by ghost believers to be a ghost magnet due to all the tragedy that took place. Number 9. Ryugyong Hotel, North Korea. Often regarded as the ugliest building in the world, which I can agree with, the Ryugyong Hotel is a 180-story structure in Pyongyang. The hotel construction started in 1987 and stopped in 1993, and it seems unlikely that it will ever be finished as a functioning hotel. The building consists of 3,000 suites and 5 revolving restaurants, at least as it was planned. Currently, it sits at the heart of the city as a concrete shell, but its massive size, aka 1,082 feet, makes it difficult to ignore as it dominates the skyline. But if you speak to anyone who lives in the city, they deny that it exists, even though it's clearly there. Tourists traveling by taxi have found it impossible to use the hotel as a landmark because no one admits that the building is there. It's even airbrushed out of official photographs. Now, even if it is ever finished, who is supposed to stay there? Even ignoring the low wages of the average North Korean, there's no real tourism industry to speak of, so it's just strange. It just sits in the middle of the city, abandoned. Number 8. Royal Hotel, Australia. On Adelaide Street in the city of Birdsville, Australia, you'll find the ruins of what was once the Royal Hotel, built in 1883. Very fast, it became as important as most of the buildings in the town, reflecting the relations of the town with the entire main and south parts of Australia. But Birdsville is well known for its dust storms, the scorching heat in the summer, and its loneliness, writes Rita's Outback Guide. Due to this, the Royal operated as a hotel for only 40 years. The fate of the hotel changed in 1923 when it was taken over by a Presbyterian mission and converted into a bush nursing home. Australian Inland Mission used the building for 5 years, offering its services to people in need, and then when the mission left, the town's population dwindled, and in 2016 the population was a mere 140 people, and the building was left to deteriorate. At the very end of the 20th century, there were some restoration works and promises of revival, however, nothing happened. The building in its poor state still stands today, and it's a popular tourist attraction, mostly due to its historic character and value, and much less about its state of being. Number 7. The Ben Moore Hotel, Alabama. The Ben Moore Hotel opened its doors in 1945 and has a rich history. In 1951, it became the first hotel in Montgomery, Alabama to welcome African Americans as guests. It quickly became an important meeting spot between representatives of the black and white populations of Montgomery during the dawn of the Civil Rights era, and played to host music icons including Tina Turner and B.B. King. But over the years, hard times, and scandals, it set on a course towards despair. What was the scandal? Well, this place became a regular meeting spot for Martin Luther King Jr. and the Reverend Ralph Althberny and other civil rights leaders. The owner was Edward Davis Sr., and according to Montgomery Advertiser Archives, Edward was arrested after 2 patrol officers witnessed him throw a hatchet and hit the Reverend in the back. Edward accused him of carrying on an affair with his wife, the Reverend told the police. The minister's shirt was slashed and he was cut slightly several times late Friday. His injuries were not serious, the August 1958 article said. The building sits now long abandoned, waiting for someone to come up with a plan to restore it, as money has always seemed to be the halting factor. Number 6. Haludovo Palace Hotel, Croatia. Another ruin in what was formerly Yugoslavia, the Haludovo Palace Hotel in what is now Croatia was once a high-end resort. Haludovo was built in 1971. Boguccione, founder of the Penthouse magazine, invested $45 million in the project and officially opened the Penthouse Adriatic Club Casino located in the hotel in 1972. However, the casino went bankrupt and the following year it was closed. During the Yugoslav Wars, the hotel became a shelter for refugees. In 1995, the hotel was privatized and went through a number of owners. It hosted its last guests in 2001. Today, the hotel resort is abandoned with the interior effectively destroyed while the buildings remain intact. Number 5. Coco Palms Resort, Hawaii. Now, the last place in the world you would expect to discover ghostly resorts would be in Hawaii, but the Coco Palms Resort is one creepy abandoned hotel that cannot be ignored. This hotel was once a prime spot for Hollywood movie stars and even appeared in the Elvis Presley film Blue Hawaii. Now, the resort includes or is near to many cultural significant spots and the sites of some of the most important legends and historical events for Native Hawaiians. Now, everything was great until Coco Palms was destroyed by Hurricane Iniki in 1992. Then on July 4th, 2014, the resort caught on fire. Thankfully, no one was injured and the fire was controlled by early afternoon. In 2016, Honolulu developers Green Waters LLC formed a partnership with Coco Palms to restore the resort. Their intent was to reopen Coco Palms as part of Hyatt's Unbound collection, but in 2019, the project collapsed. Number 4. El Hotel de Salto, Colombia. In San Antonio del Tequendama, Colombia, a 1920s residential mansion was constructed looking over the falls. For 60 years, it operated as a hotel. It was built in 1923 as a luxury hotel to host elite travelers visiting the area. Ordered and built by the President of Colombia and designed by the architect Carlos Otero Tapias, the hotel was a place for the richest to gather and indulge in the most exceptional experiences. It was meant to be renovated in the 1950s, but due to pollution from the Bottega River, the project was dismissed. In the 1970s, sewage started affecting the river, so the hotel closed in the early 1990s as a result of the overwhelming pollution of the river. Some reports state that it's the second most polluted river worldwide, as the river is full of feces, waste, chemicals, and many other toxic things. Now, over the years, the hotel began to deteriorate until it was left deserted altogether. Today, the hotel is said to be haunted. Now, this is owing to the fact that many people have used its location as a place to end their lives. It's also said that the Muisca Indians used to jump into the falls to evade capture from Spanish conquerors. The myth is that those who would jump would turn into eagles and soar to freedom, and sadly this appealed to most wanderers who would then leap to their death. Number 3. Decor Palace Hotel, Liberia. The 120-room Decor Palace Hotel opened in 1960, was designed and built by Israeli industrialist Moshe Meir. It was the first international class hotel in Liberia and was for many years one of the few 5-star hotels in all of Africa. The prestigious hotel was closed in the 80s when the political situation became too unstable. With political uncertainty looming, the Decor Hotel closed in 1989, just before the coup led by Charles Taylor, which ousted President Samuel Doe and marked the beginning of the First Liberian Civil War. The building endured much damage during this period due to both the violence of the war and to the post-war looting. Much of the hotel was damaged during the Civil War that followed and the very poor families that took the opportunity there to settle. In 2007, the Ministry of Justice evicted the squatters residing in the hotel. In 2008, the government of Liberia signed a lease agreement with the government of Liba to begin clearing the property of debris in 2010. The building sits on Decor Hill, the highest point of the city, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, the St. Paul River, and Monrovia's West Point district, but it is now forbidden to visit. Number 2. Lee Plaza, Michigan. Lee Plaza is a 15-story building that was built in 1929. It was built for tourists to stay as long as possible, as the owner had thought of everything: hairdresser, library, shops, and everything was decorated with the finest paintings and marbles. But over the years, it changed owners several times and began to grow old, with permanent tenants in the 70s and 80s. It closed its doors down in 1997 after the death of a resident. An 84-year-old resident was found dead in her room, suffocated with a pillow. As you would assume, many people left after this, resulting in the building closing. It was to be demolished, but was classified as a historic monument thanks to its architecture and its history. It was added to the United States National Register of Historic Places on November 5th, 1981. And coming in at number 1 is Hotel Baker, Texas. The story of Baker Hotel began in 1922 when citizens of Mineral Wells, concerned that non-citizens were profiting from the growing fame of the community's mineral water, raised $150,000 in an effort to build a large hotel facility owned by local shareholders. Hotel Baker was one of the most ambitious hotel projects in the booming seaside region. It was the first hotel in Texas to be equipped with an Olympic pool that could accommodate up to 2,500 people. It could also house 450 guest rooms, 2 ballrooms, an in-house beauty shop, and all other novelties such as a bowling alley, a gymnasium, and an outdoor swimming pool. Now, despite the stock market crash of 1929 and the enormous difficulties in the 30s, it held the shock until the end of World War II, before the owner did not put the key under the door in 1963. After a brief reopening in 1965 and a succession of owners, the hotel again closed its doors in 1972, and this time permanently. The owner shut down the building on April 30th, 1963. The hotel reopened 2 years later in 1965 when a group of local investors leased the structure from the Baker family, but the revival was brief. In 1972, the Baker closed its doors for the last time. Although several groups have made offers to rehabilitate the structure, the building remained abandoned until 2019, when it was announced that the Baker Hotel would finally be renovated and restored, but who knows when and if it will really get restored.
Starting us off at number 10 is Elms Hotel and Spa. Located in Missouri, some believe this hotel might just be the most haunted in the entire state. Originally built in 1888, just 10 years after its construction, the Elms Hotel was destroyed by a fire. It was a tragic event, but luckily no one lost their lives. But what's mysterious is that in 1910, the hotel went up in flames once more. Again, no one lost their lives, but this time, passersby noticed something. It appeared as though a spirit was walking around the embers, and rumors began circulating that somehow the mysterious entity had lit the flames. But just who exactly is this spooky arson demon, and why did they burn down the hotel? More importantly, if it was them, what made them stop? And it's not just fire maniac ghosts that haunt these halls. Another commonly seen apparition is that of a grieving woman who wanders the halls looking for her little one. But make no mistake, though she may be grieving, she is an angry entity. She'll pull at their hair or throw objects across the room while they are asleep to try and get your attention. Maybe she believes the guests are who took her little one from her, or maybe she is just angry to have visitors there. But either way, if I were you, I would not stay the night if you're looking for a peaceful sleep. Coming in at number 9, the Biltmore Hotel. Back in 1929, New York gangster Thomas "Fatty" Walsh was staying in the Everglades suite on the 13th floor of the Biltmore Hotel in Florida. Apparently, Fatty routinely stayed here and used the suite as a speakeasy and casino for him and his friends. However, after a heated argument over gambling debts, Fatty was shot by fellow mobster Edward Wilson and died right on the scene, and it appears he has never left. Once a player, still a player, the New York gangster is notorious for appearing only to women who he deems attractive and tricks them into visiting him on the 13th floor. One woman recounted her stay with her husband and said while in the elevator, all of a sudden, the doors opened on the 13th floor, despite that neither of them had requested that floor. They waited a moment and the doors wouldn't close, so the woman stepped out to see what was going on. As soon as she did, the doors slammed behind her on the elevator and it continued its journey to the lobby. The husband, worried for his wife, tried to reach the 13th floor but was unable, so he went back to their suite only to find his wife beside herself and outright spooked. She said when the doors shut behind her, she heard a maniacal laugh and the smell of cigar smoke. On top of Fatty's ghost, other entities are routinely seen walking through the walls, slamming doors, or watching you sleep. So it's a no for me. Coming in at number 8 is Hawthorne Hotel. While this entire Salem hotel is said to be haunted by several different entities, the rooms you really need to be afraid of are 612 and 325. Room 612 and the 6th floor in general is where the apparition of a woman is often seen roaming the halls, who many believe is the ghost of Bridget Bishop, the first woman executed during the witch trials. Accused of bewitching 5 other women, she died in 1692 and remains haunting the property, seeking revenge for her life taken too soon. Those that stay in this room report a strong smell of apples, which most think has to do with the fact that she owned an apple orchard on the land where the hotel was built in 1925. But of course, it is her frightening apparition that stares at you while you sleep that is really unsettling. As for room 325, it's believed the entities that haunt this room may have been past guests. No one is quite sure why they are there, but these entities are definitely frightening. Guests report lights turning on and off with no explanation, as well as water faucets doing the same within the room. While lying on the bed, guests have reported experiencing an extreme level of cold, with many saying
with many reporting being grabbed or tugged at while trying to fall asleep. Plus, at night, it's said the screams and cries of the past guests can be heard echoing in the room. But what's strange is it never seems to occur anywhere else in the building. Coming in at number 7, Fort Garry Hotel. Built in 1903, since its doors opened to the public, many famous figures have stayed overnight, including Queen Elizabeth II, King George VI, Louis Armstrong, even Liberace. But don't let the star-studded guest list ease your suspicions. This place is straight up frightening, especially room 202, where it said a woman took her own life by hanging in the closet. Those that have dared to stay in the haunted room claim they saw blood drip down the walls and that a terrifying woman wearing a cloak would appear out of nowhere, often hovering over the foot of the bed while you sleep at night. What's even scarier is that some say she will crawl into the bed with you and that you can feel her cold, ghostly frame wrap around you. But it's not just the room where you might run into the spooky ghoul. She's known to haunt the hotel lounge as well, where staff and guests alike claim to hear loud cries coming from the same corner. I mean, unless you're looking to literally cuddle up with a ghost, I would steer clear of this one. Coming in at number 6, the Fairmont Hotel. While many of us know Banff for the gorgeous, picturesque Rocky Mountains, the famous Fairmont Hotel also has a dark secret. Room 873. As the story goes, years and years ago, an entire family was killed in this very room. After a long investigation, the room was refurbished and went back into the usual cycle. But soon the hotel staff were receiving many disturbances about the room that sent their blood running cold. Guests said they would fall asleep only to be awoken by screams, and that when the lights turned off, bloody handprints would be found on the mirrors. Staff would rush to the room to investigate, but all seemed to have disappeared by the time they got there. Afraid of what lurked inside, the room was sealed shut and never to be entered again. And if you go there now, no trace of the room exists. There is only a long hallway where a door used to be, and if you knock along the wall, you'll hear a hollow noise where it's believed the room was once sealed up many years ago. But just because they've locked up this door doesn't mean the terrifying ghosts were trapped inside. It seems room 692 has taken over as the most haunted room in the joint, and the same kinds of frightening phenomena continue. And if that weren't enough, it's also reported the ghost of a bride is seen dancing in the ballroom. It said she tragically lost her life on her wedding day after tripping down the stairs, breaking her neck, and being set ablaze by nearby candles. Some guests claim to have witnessed her on fire walking through the halls, and who knows, she might just come and haunt you in room 692. Coming in at number 5, the Empress Hotel. Located in Victoria, British Columbia, the Empress Hotel is a decadent building known to be visited by some of the most elite of our society. But don't be fooled by its gorgeous exterior and extravagant decor. It just might be one of the most haunted hotels in all of Canada. There are many ghost stories told about this hotel, like the construction worker who was working during the 1960s and came across a shadowy figure hanging from the chandelier, only to discover a staff member had taken their life in that very room exactly 1 year prior. Guests also report an elderly woman in pajamas who'll knock at your door in the middle of the night asking for help finding her room, only to take you to the elevator and disappear right before your eyes. It's believed she was a ghost who haunted a room that has since been demolished due to the need for more elevators, hence her confusion and disappearance as soon as she steps foot into one. Others, like the building's architect and a young girl, haunt the building, but the most frightening spirit is the maid, Lizzie. Back in 1909, 1 year after the hotel's opening, Lizzie stepped out onto the hotel fire escape to say her rosary, as she did every night. But this time, unbeknownst to poor Lizzie, the contractor had disassembled the platform, and so Lizzie plummeted to her death from the 6th story. Guests who now stay anywhere on the 6th floor claim to have seen her walk through walls or hear her screams late at night, and believe she is out seeking revenge on the worker responsible for the end of her life. Coming in at number 4, Tubac Golf Resort and Spa. It's one thing to witness the sight of a ghost, but in my opinion, it's a whole other terror to be physically grabbed or moved by one. According to one hotel worker back in 2010, they ended up having to work late, so instead of going home, he just decided to stay the night in the Otero Ranch House. The ranch house had long been associated with ghostly apparitions and frightening tales, but the staff member was exhausted and it was the only room available, so he figured he would take his chances. When he got in, he decided to lay down on the couch and watch some TV for a bit before heading to bed, when suddenly he felt it move, and not just a little. According to the staff member, the entire couch lifted up up off the floor and with him in it jerked several feet towards the TV. He was immediately freaked out, but before he could get up off the couch, the curtains that hung across the room from him lifted up and came down with a swoosh on top of him. Needless to say, he immediately bolted from the room and did not dare spend the rest of the night. Although he still works at the resort, he has never again stepped foot in the Otero Ranch and will choose sleeping in his car over ever staying a minute in the haunted room. Coming in at number 3, Hotel Provincial. Branded as one of the most haunted places in New Orleans, the Hotel Provincial is located in the infamously haunted French Quarter. Back in the day, there was a military hospital just down the street from the hotel, and one of the buildings used a medicinal herb garden for the hospital, which seems a little strange, but does make sense when you find out the kinds of spirits that haunt the halls. Today, the hotel consists of 5 buildings, and although ghosts are known to lurk in each, the most haunted building is believed to be number 5. Guests of building number 5 have reported seeing insane things, such as Confederate soldiers covered in blood, moaning from agonizing pain, who miraculously disappear once the lights turn on. Others have reported apparitions of surgeons in the halls, and maybe most disturbing is the amount of guests that have seen strange pools of blood appear on their bedding or the floor that disappear just as fast as they came into view. One guest even reported that as the elevator door opened on the hotel's 2nd floor, the hospital was entirely in view. So it seems as though the soldiers that died in the hospital down the street took a liking to the hotel and continued to haunt all the visitors who enter to this day. Coming in at number 2, Ottawa Jail Hostel. As you probably already figured out from the name, once upon a time this building was a jail. It opened its doors to the public in 1862 and quickly became the site of many public executions. On top of that, living conditions were harsh, with small, cold, and windowless cells that only had a small hole to allow for airflow. But things didn't start getting spooky until years later. After the building was converted into the hostel it is today, the parking lot was partially excavated to build a bridge, but to the construction workers' horror, the remains of 140 bodies were uncovered on the ground, and it's believed that all 140 bodies were prisoners who lost their life to execution. The most famous inmate was Patrick James Whelan, a man who up until his last breath pleaded he was not guilty of his convicted crime. What's worse is that he was told his body would be transported back to Montreal after his execution, but this promise was not kept, and they laid him to rest on the prison grounds. Angry and out for revenge, many guests say they have seen him or even been the victim of his wrath during their stay. One guest in particular, who made it very clear that she didn't even believe in ghosts prior to her stay, said at 1 o'clock in the morning she was woken by someone grabbing her arm and trying to pull her out of the bed. Her friend, who was across the room from her, woke when the girl screamed, "Let me go," into the darkness, and the two were both so frightened they couldn't fall back asleep. And last up, in our number 1 spot, La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits. And some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory, considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century, the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's 4 walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen dressed in beautiful clothing roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor reported to have died on the steps of the hotel, but the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair and said, "You belong to me. I'll never let you go. Needless to say, he never returned, and I do not blame him. If I ever saw that lady in my room, I would be running as fast as I could. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button and let me know of any other spooky haunted hotels across North America. I'll see you next time.
We're starting off the list with Hotel Monte Vista in Flagstaff, Arizona. There is some disturbing stuff going on at this place. At least that's what I've read. This place is teeming with former guests who checked into the hotel and never left, having met gruesome ends. Their spirits are now lingering within the establishment. One ghost, or in this case a pair of ghosts, are two women who were thrown from the 3rd floor back in the day and now spend their time as ghosts attempting to strangle male guests in their sleep. One long-term guest in the early 80s had a strange hobby of hanging meat from the chandelier in his room. One day he was found dead in his room. That room is 220, and guests and staff report strange activity going on in the room. Some staff just veer clear of it completely. The TV is known to turn on its own. This even continued after the TV was replaced, and some report the feeling of being touched by a cold, unseen hand. Number 9, the Hotel del Salto. This Colombian hotel was first erected in 1923 and it has quite the reputation. That's why it has its dark nickname, which I can't really say the name of here, but suffice to say, a good number of people have died here. This place is absolutely gorgeous, overlooking the Tequendama waterfalls, but legend has it that in order to prevent being captured by Spanish conquistadors, the natives of the area would jump from these very cliffs. During the hotel's operation, a good number of people took their lives there or would fall by mistake, and this picturesque building became steeped in sadness and despair. The building still stands today, now having been transformed into a museum, but some still say not to go near the property at night, as countless lost souls still roam the grounds. At number 8, we have the Hotel del Coronado. This beautiful San Diego hotel is known to have had some pretty famous guests like President Ronald Reagan and Katharine Hepburn, just to name a couple. But there's also one ghost who checked in and has never left. Her name is Kate Morgan, and she's been haunting the hotel since her death in 1892. Kate Morgan had checked into the hotel and spent a few days there before taking her own life. She'd had stomach cancer and was waiting for her brother, who was a doctor, to arrive and assist her with her illness, but he didn't show up, and she hadn't received any letters. Her spirit is said to roam the property to this day, still waiting for her brother to finally arrive, especially on the 3rd floor. Her room is frequently requested by paranormal enthusiasts. There's another ghost supposedly said to haunt the hotel though, an actress by the name of Isadore Rush, who drowned by the beach in 1904. Staff have reported seeing the lights turn on and off in her room that she'd been staying in, even when the room is empty. Course. Next, we have the Mermaid Inn in East Sussex. This historical building was built at some time in the 12th or 13th centuries. With a building that old, it's no surprise people say it's haunted. Gotta say, it'd be pretty incredible to stay in a place like this. This place has quite the history. It was originally frequented mostly by medieval sailors. From 1420 to 1770, it was a bar and an inn, which was frequently visited by the Hawkhurst Gang, a group of privateers who terrorized the area. The Mermaid Inn saw a number of deaths at the hands of these criminals over the years, some of which had been attempting to snitch on them. One of the leaders, Thomas Kingsmill, who was executed in 1749 for his crimes, is said to haunt the inn till this very day. The inn was eventually reopened in 1993, and guests have reported seeing a ghostly figure of a woman in white standing at the front of their bed when they wake up. There's also the spirit of a maid who died at the hands of a smuggler in room 5, which has been reportedly haunted well before the modern era. And of course, you have Thomas Kingsmill himself, who supposedly haunts a rocking chair in room 17. At number 6, we have the Mizpah Hotel in Nevada. This hotel opened in 1904 and was one of the first luxury hotels built in the state. It's a really nice looking hotel with Victorian era decor. I imagine it looks almost exactly as it did in the 1900s. As luxurious as this place is though, there's a dark piece of history that still lingers within the walls of the building to this day, and that is the death of a guest whose name has been lost to time but is known simply as the Red Lady. The Red Lady was believed to have lived at the hotel, providing a specific service for male clientele, the oldest trade in the world. The story goes that one of her clients saw her with another man and in a fit of jealous rage took her life. In some versions of the tale, she was strangled, in others she fell to her death from the 5th floor. But no matter what version you hear, it all ends the same way, with her spirit lingering within the hotel. Men will sometimes hear her disembodied voice whispering sweet things in their ears. Some have reported finding a pearl from her broken necklace under their pillows. You know what, that doesn't sound bad actually. I'll take a pearl and a seductive whisper, why not? Number 5, the Omni Grove Park Inn. You can find this lovely historic hotel in Asheville, North Carolina. For years, however, guests and staff alike have reported feeling the presence of a spirit simply known as the Pink Lady. The Pink Lady was a former guest at the hotel who unfortunately never left. She's often described simply as a pinkish, smoky haze, but will sometimes take on the form of a young woman in a pink ball gown. The story goes that the woman was the mistress of a married man and was staying in room 545, the room she's said to still haunt to this very day. She met her end falling from the 5th floor balcony to the 3rd. In some stories she was thrown, in others she jumped herself, but the Pink Lady sounds like a pretty fun ghost, to be honest. Some report their room being rearranged at night, lights turning on and off by themselves, and some have even woken up in the middle of the night with their feet being tickled. Never heard of a ghost doing that before, but I appreciate the creativity. Next up is the Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio, Texas. It's pretty obvious why this hotel is so supposedly haunted. From 1924 to 1976, the building was a hospital, complete with a morgue and crematorium. It didn't become a hotel until 1984. Staff and guests have reported all sorts of strange phenomena going on here. You have your more standard ghost stuff, of course. Maids will clean a room only to come out of the bathroom to see pillows tossed onto the floor, doors opening and closing on their own. I'm sure people hear things. Sometimes the elevators will randomly stop at various floors for no reason. Some guests have said they've heard the phone in their room ring and then they've gone to pick it up. There's no one on the other end of the line. One story goes that a guest had returned to her room after dinner to find that her bathtub had been filled with blue water. Now that could be an outright lie, or a staff member just went into her room and had a bath while she was out. But there are a lot of other strange things that go on here. The creepiest reports are those related to the lingering spirits who met their end as hospital patients. Some claim to hear the sound of a hospital cart being wheeled down the hallway. The smell of antiseptic often wafts throughout the 14th floor, especially. There are also shadowy figures said to move across the walls with no visible source. Number 3, the Ancient Ram Inn. Now, unfortunately, you can't actually stay in this place now. The owner uses it as their home. Man, I'd love to get a room here. The place was built all the way back in 1145. That probably isn't super exciting for the Europeans in the audience or like anyone really outside of North America, but I don't think I've ever stepped foot in a place that old. Anyway, you can only imagine how much history surrounds this building. This place was actually built on the grounds of a 5,000-year-old pagan burial site. Reports of strange occurrences, including ghostly apparitions and disembodied voices, have been reported, and as to what spirit or spirits these voices belong to, one of the most famous legends involves a witch who was supposedly burned at the stake on the property at some point in the 1500s. There are also legends of a number of tragic events, such as human sacrifices that are said to have taken place within its walls. And number 2, we have, of course, the Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles has a notorious history marked by a series of incredibly grim events. It's become quite infamous for its association with criminal activity and unsettling paranormal occurrences. The 1940s saw the Cecil being linked to several unalivings, leading to its pretty blunt nickname. The hotel was also the temporary residence of the infamous Richard Ramirez during his horrific spree. One of the most well-known incidents in modern times was, of course, the case of Elisa Lam in 2013. Her mysterious death and that eerie elevator surveillance footage captured attention from everyone across the internet. And for all these reasons and more, many have claimed the building to be incredibly haunted. Reports of strange noises and ghostly sightings have been being claimed for decades. And lastly, we have the Langham Hotel in London, England, said to be one of the most haunted hotels in the country. The hotel was built in 1865, so a lot of guests have stayed at this place over the years, some of which have never left. There are said to be 5 primary ghosts that haunt this building. Some people apparently hear a baby crying at night. Well, I mean, I guess babies might stay at the hotel, but if it's just a disembodied baby voice, that's creepy. One primary ghost is that of a German prince who fell from his upper story window. Staff have reported seeing his ghostly figure moving through walls. His presence is also always accompanied by a drop in temperature. Room 333 is supposedly the most haunted room. One man, a BBC newscaster, woke up to see the ghostly figure of a man in Victoria-era evening wear. The figure hovered in the air. It had no legs. Classic ghost kind of look. The figure started floating towards the man with its arms out, as if it was going to grab him. In 2014, several English national team cricket players left the hotel in the middle of the night because of supposed paranormal activity going on in their rooms. They reported sudden, unexplained heat, their bathroom taps turned on by themselves, and they just had this uneasy feeling of a strange presence lurking in their rooms.
Starting us off at number 10, cameras. A woman came to Texas for what she believed was a legitimate job interview with an IT service provider, but instead she found herself being recorded in a hotel room booked for her by the man claiming to be the potential employee's CEO. The woman said that the man booked the room for the night and he checked in before her arrival. She suspects that when he put a video camera disguised as a clock in the room. After she was in the room and had started getting undressed to get ready for the interview later that day, she said 2 men walked into the room unannounced. The men told her they thought the room was vacant and left almost immediately, but wouldn't tell the woman why they were there. There was just a gut instinct that something wasn't right. I just knew I was being watched, she said. After looking around the room, the woman noticed the digital alarm clock had a quarter-sized camera in the face. She unplugged it and took the back off, and minutes later got a call from the supposed CEO asking her if everything was okay. She told the front desk and hotel staff moved her belongings into the new room, and the woman called the police. She didn't hear from the man again and said when police tried that same day calling a number he'd given her, it had been disconnected. The woman is now suing the man for intruding on her privacy and causing months of mental anguish, according to the lawsuit. And honestly, I hope she wins because that is scary. Next up at number 9, shadow figure. A Reddit user said, I used to work in my aunt and uncle's hotel in a Scottish village about 12 years ago, and the freakiest thing that happened to me was one night when I was sleeping in the staff quarters and heard a banging noise from along the corridor. This was about 3 a.m. after most of the staff had gone to bed. I got up to go and tell whoever was coming in late to shut up so I could go back to sleep, but the corridor was empty. Well lit, I have to add. This is key. So I walk down to the end of the corridor to see if it's folks coming up the stairs, drunk or whatever. I look down to see a figure stomping up the stairs. The only way I can describe it is as though a shadow of a person that was solid. There were no features on the face or clothes on its body. I turned and ran back to my room and shut the door. I could still hear the stomping for some time, and I don't think I got a wink of sleep at all that night. I didn't leave my room until the sun was shining through my window. I asked a few of the other staff if they'd heard the banging that night, but nobody else had. Moving on to number 8, the phone call and break-in. The online user posted this story saying, my father was staying at some crappy Motel 6 in a shady area of town. His room was the last room at the end of the hallway on the top floor. In the middle of the night on the last night he was in town, he was woken by the phone ringing in his room. It was the front desk, and they said something along the lines of, sorry to wake you, but we've been receiving a couple of reports about rooms being broken into and some stuff being swiped. We're just calling to make sure you lock your door and are safe. My father replies that he's fine and hangs up. He decided to go double check that his door is locked. As he sits up in bed, he notices that the door to his room is ajar. Being spooked, he cautiously checks the room and finds that nothing is missing and no one else is in the room. He creeps to the door and peeks out. Sitting right outside his room on the windowsill of the hallway window is his shaving kit. Creeped out of his mind, he quickly grabs it and locks the door. After he calms down a bit, he calls down to the front desk and says, "Hey, you just called me about the break-ins around the hotel, and I just want to report that my room was broken into when I was sleeping. Nothing taken and I'm fine. Figured you'd like to know." The front desk replies, "You must be mistaken. We never called your room and we haven't received any reports of break-ins." Creepy. Moving on to number 7, scary woman. This Reddit user said, "I once stayed in room 410 of the Queen Anne Hotel in San Francisco. Woke up in the middle of the night needing to go to the bathroom and saw what appeared like a decaying woman with withered flesh and a blue-white glow at the foot of the bed, seeming to stare at me, in spite of having eyes that were just black sunken holes. It was so terrifying I passed out. Woke up in the morning and told my girlfriend at the time about it when she came over. She laughed, and when I asked why, she said she booked that room because the hotel was supposed to be haunted, that room specifically, and she was using me as a blind test case to see if it was true. Ended up staying there another 3 nights without anything odd happening." Next up at number 6, room 217. Stanley Hotel is very haunted, but one of the most haunted rooms is room 217. The room is thought to be haunted by Elizabeth Wilson, aka Mrs. Wilson. She was the hotel's head housekeeper, and during a storm in 1911 was injured during an explosion as she was lighting the lanterns in room 217. She survived, though broke her ankles, and her spirit seems to be a regular in the room. Guests have reported items moved, luggage unpacked, and lights being turned on and off. Oh, and Mrs. Wilson is old-fashioned. She doesn't like it when unmarried guests shack up together, so some couples have reported feeling a cold force come between them. Now, this is where horror writer Stephen King spent the night and got the inspiration for his 1977 bestseller, The Shining. When King and his wife arrived at the hotel, it was closing down for the season, and they were the only overnight guests staying there. They ate dinner in an empty dining room while pre-recorded orchestra music played before retreating to their room on the spacious and eerily empty second floor. King woke up that night to a terrifying dream about his 3-year-old son being chased through the corridors and screaming. Due to this, he jerked out of bed, realizing it was a dream. He lit a cigarette on the balcony, and the plot for his now famous book shaped up. Coming in at number 5, employee disappeared. This user tells a story from when they were young. They said, "I was once in a hotel with my sister and we were walking through the halls. Then we decided to have fun and see what staff doors were open. We got into the weight room, it was 3 a.m., supposed to be locked, and started screwing with the weight equipment. Just as we were about to leave, this one employee gets up from the dark corner and walks out in front of us. We rush out just to see him walk down the stairs. Still in the mood of adventure, we head to the stairs and see her going down and down. She went to the basement and then gone. The stairs ended in a cut-off area and there was nowhere to go, but she was gone. Creeped out, we took a zigzag path back to our room, not to be followed." Next up at number 4, housekeeping. A Reddit user said, "I worked housekeeping in a chain hotel. There was one room at the end of the hall where the faucet would turn on full blast by itself while anyone was working in there. I'd be cleaning the room and suddenly hear water gurgling down the drain. Another time I was working on the tub and heard it turn on behind me. Whoever or whatever it was would also turn on the TV. I was warned on my first day that things would happen in that room, and then while making a bed, I'd suddenly hear muffled voices and see that the TV was on. Whatever part of the room my back was to, it felt like someone was there. I got the feeling they didn't want to be in the way, but they didn't want to be alone. Quote, none of the staff felt threatened. We all felt that the entity was lonely and trying to reach out. The hotel has since been bought by a college and was turned into dorms. bathrooms. I hope having people staying in the room more steadily will be a good thing for whoever that spirit was. Maybe they felt less lonely with students actually living there than a revolving door of hotel guests. Moving on to number 3. Shaking door. This hotel worker said, "I was working late just past midnight when I went to use the bathroom in the lobby. It was a pretty standard large men's bathroom with urinals and sit-down stalls. I was the only one in there and I went to use one of the urinals. As I was peeing, I heard a rapid knocking sound coming from behind me. I looked and saw the door from the handicap stall vibrating, which was what was making the knocking sound. It was like someone locked the door and was shaking it. I figured it was a coworker playing a prank, so I laughed and said, 'Very funny.' It immediately stopped. I walked over, knocked, and the door swung open. No one was inside. I ran the hell out." Quote, "There was no way the door could have made that noise without being locked. I still use that particular bathroom, but never late at night. I really can't think of a logical explanation for this and was terrified." Coming in at number 2. The face. This user told a story about a family vacation, saying, "When I was 15, my family went for a trip to a hill station named Shimla in India. We booked a suite in a hotel in which the master bedroom had a glass platform 8 by 8 feet sticking about 2 feet outside the room over the valleys, which were hundreds of feet below us. I decided to sleep on the platform overlooking the hills and valleys while my dad slept on the bed. My mother and sister were in the other bedroom. So at around 1:30 at night, I was sleeping on my side facing the glass, which was about 3 inches from my face. Suddenly, my eyes opened and I saw a woman looking at me intently from outside the glass. I still remember clearly her face was totally pale and eyes dark with black hair and some dark clothes on the body. It took me 3 to 4 seconds to realize where I am and that this is not some human looking through a window, but some entity floating outside my room. I shouted as loud as I could and pushed myself back so hard from the glass that I ended up hitting the other end of the room by force. My dad woke up and turned on all the lights, but there was no one to be seen now. That was the last time I ever slept with my window shades open." And last up in our number 1 spot, the body. Sony Millbrook was first reported missing in late January of 2010. News reports say Sony was staying at the Budget Lodge Hotel and was last seen on January 27th. A missing persons case was opened a few days after her disappearance, and family members had later come to clean her belongings from the motel. The case ended abruptly on March 17th when her body was found inside the bed frame in the room she was occupying. It said her room had been cleaned many times since January 28th, workers told police. The room also had been rented out several times since her disappearance. Motel staff called detectives after a foul odor coming from the room led to the discovery. Police said Millbrook's body had been stuffed in the metal box frame which sits on the floor. The box spring and mattress are also set inside the metal frame.